Hi everyone, I'm Lee. So I'm another recruiter here at ITV. Just wanted to talk through sort of interviews, assessment centres, and sort of the preparation around that, and then what to sort of expect on the day. So the first things first is always make sure that you know where, when, and who you're going to meet. So when you're arranging this over the telephone or on email with your recruiters, just make sure that you're really clear on all of those points, and read the diary invite that gets sent over to you from start to finish. Quite often people forget that there could be some content in there, especially if it's around the preparation of sort of presentations or anything like that. Anything that you might need to prepare, there'll be useful hints and tips in there. There might also reference a Q&A page on the website, helpful hints and tips page and things like that. So always read that from start to finish. Understand the background of the role. So don't be afraid to ask the recruiter, how was this role become available? If it's an apprenticeship, then it could be just an annual thing that we do, but it could be you're going for a permanent role or a fixed term role, and just to understand sort of what that reason is. If somebody's left the business, if somebody's moved internally, you're more than welcome to ask those questions if the recruiter doesn't already give you that information. Also be aware of when you are applying, whether it's a maternity cover, whether it's a fixed term contract, a secondment, a new role, what that means for you as somebody coming in. So if it's a fixed term contract and it is your first employment, you might not realise that is for the period of whatever the application says, the adverts. It could be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And at the end of that, there may well be an opportunity to go permanent, but it might not. So just being aware of the terminology that might be used on those adverts. Make sure that you're reading the job description from start to finish, and you really understand what the job entails. That will also help you prepare. So when you're responding to questions, always try and remember, the role, the responsibilities of the role that are mentioned on the job description, so that you're selling yourself in the best light. So if you've done a job and maybe some of the responsibilities in your previous role aren't that relevant to this role, still mention them, but I wouldn't spend too long going into that particular element of your job if it's not necessarily relevant to the role that you're applying for. Around the format of the interview, that will again should normally be in the interview invite. So it might be conversational, purely conversational. So it's just a chat between you and the person on the other end of the line, whether it's a telephone call, face-to-face, or a Google Hangout, for example. And it could literally just be a question and answer with nothing to prepare. It could be that it's scenario based. So they might ask you in a X, Y, and Z scenario, what would you do? Where possible, always try and refer back to an example where you've been in the past, as opposed to a hypothetical answer. But equally, scenario based often are hypothetical because you might not have found yourself in that scenario before. So just answer it as honestly as you can. And yeah, if it's technical, it might be slightly more, how would you do X, Y, and Z? So just be aware and feel free to ask your recruiter what's the format of the interview. And then understanding the business area that you're interviewing for. So it might be that you're interviewing for news. It could be that you're interviewing for HR. Just try and do a bit of research. I know it's not always the easiest thing to find because websites can be quite, you can end up finding yourself going down a rabbit hole, but just try and look for some overview information. And if it's regional, have a look at what's going on within that business in that region. The best place to look for things like that and business updates might be LinkedIn. So just have a look, search for the company, look at what they've recently posted, what are they talking about, what's going on in their world. And also when you're just doing general research on the business, more often than not, companies will say as an introductory question, so what is it you know about us? What is it we do? So it's good to have a basic understanding of that. And if you have done your research, you might find that they've recently won an award that you could drop into conversation. All of those things really show that you're interested in the role. And just make sure you ask questions. So it's always handy to come with a notebook. Bring with you any notes, as I say, on bits that you want to discuss about the job description. If there's anything that you're not certain of or you're not sure of that phrase, feel free to ask the question. keep a list of your questions that you might want to ask about the role. They may well be answered during the interview, but it's always good to have that prepared. And yeah, just something to keep a note if anything comes up in the interview that you want to save a question till after, or retain that information. Remember that the interviews are just as much about you obtaining information about the business as it is about the business obtaining information about you. It's a two-way street, and we want you to be as interested in the role as we are in you. So just on to the next slide, just around sort of typical interview questions. So there will be introductory questions, as I say, a little bit about, tell me about your history, or if you're new into the working world, it might just be, give me a run through of your qualifications, your schools, what your interests and hobbies are. That's just get a bit more of an understanding about you as a person. They might ask you what you know about the business. And then more often than not, they'll, like it says there, sort of a CV review about sort of your motivation, why this role, what captured your attention, what do you like about potentially working in this industry or company. Then they might go on to some competency-based questions, rolling into technical questions, as we said earlier. There may be a short presentation. So if there is a presentation, just make sure that you've got as much information again from the recruiter as possible. What is it they're looking for from the presentation specifically, so that you can tailor it and you're not sort of trying to guess and put too much into the presentation. If they do give you a time limit, do try and stick to that. I know it's really hard and we often go off on a tangent and we can sometimes go off and waffle a little bit, but try and keep it to that time. So it gives the interviewers time to ask you some questions on the content of the presentation, and gives you that discussion period at the end should you have any questions. So hopefully that gives you a nice overview. Just make sure that your answers are really clear, really concise. You try and keep to the question. If you need the interviewer to repeat the question, don't be afraid to ask. Also take your time in answering. Don't feel that you have to give an immediate response. In interviews, quite often there will be a short silence, and that's okay. It gives you time to think about what you're answering before answering. So yeah, just keep it clear, concise. Try and think about positive body language as well. So, make sure that you're actively listening, that you look interested. Try not to, it's automatic when we're a little bit nervous, maybe to cross our arms. Try not to have your arms crossed. Yeah, just think about positive first impressions, and yeah, you'll smash it.